our next speaker, who is Dr. Kari Baber, one of my colleagues as well. Kari is a psychologist here at AI duPont and works with children and families, doing lots of consultation and treatment and giving great advice. And on top of that, is one of the nicest people I know. So I think you'll really enjoy spending some time with Kari this evening. Please join me in welcoming Kari.
Well, that was a really nice introduction. Thank you. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking with you guys tonight about how to approach parenting in this digital age. And I think a lot of times there's some trepidation that comes along with that. How many of you had Facebook when you were a teenager? I just wanted to check. How many of you have kids who have or would like to have a Facebook account? Okay. How many of you have kids who are teenagers, 13 and up? And how about 10 to 13, sort of that tween, okay? And how about under the age of 10? Great, oh good, so we've got this whole developmental spectrum represented, and I'm sure that you are hearing lots of different kinds of questions from your kids about technology. I want to talk just a little bit with you about the types of things we want to keep in mind in terms of helping them negotiate this technology, given that a lot of us haven't had firsthand experience as kids and teenagers with the same type of technology that they have available to them today. And then we'll really just open up for questions and answers to talk about some more specific kind of situations. So some of these images might look a little bit familiar. I don't know if anyone experiences that middle one quite yet. There are a lot of kids who are really pretty plugged in today. Kaiser Family Foundation recently did a study, it was 2008 to 2009, and they asked over 700 kids to report how much technology they use in a given day. And the average amount of time spent on technology for kids from 8 to 18 was 7 hours, over 7 hours. And that takes into account multitasking, so when you're listening to music while surfing the web. And it also takes out, also takes out time spent on the phone or texting. So that's a lot of time. And in fact, when I saw that number, I thought, how is that even possible? And I started sort of counting time sleeping and time at school. And there are probably some peculiarities in terms of how those data were collected. But I think overall, if we use that as kind of a frame for thinking about the fact that kids are really plugged in and kids have access to all sorts of things that we want to be able to connect with them about. So we tend to hear a lot in the media about the downsides, the cyberbullying, the horrible cases where situations and altercations at school have kind of gone out of control online, and those things are very real and they do happen. At the same time, the research suggests that there really are some positive things that go along with some of these new media for kids. And so let's not lose sight of the fact that kids today have some opportunities that we didn't have by virtue of not having this media available to us. So some of the research suggests that, of course there's the connecting with friends by social networking. But in addition, kids today, and teenagers particularly who are really plugged in, have access to community organizations, community causes, global causes that we might not have been aware of or had any way to connect to when we were younger. There's some really amazing public health awareness campaigns out there that are capitalizing on social media, and teens are savvy about things like health screenings, global disasters in a way that we probably weren't. So that's a really neat thing that comes along with all this technology. There's been some research to show that kids' creativity is enhanced by having access to people who are thinking about the same kind of issues and same kind of things, but who may be at a geographic distance from them. Lots of schools are using media to supplement learning and are seeing that to be a very positive development. So schools are using blog assignments for writing development. Schools are using YouTube searches for kids to develop research skills. There's some evidence to suggest that that's a really helpful and positive thing, and that helps prepare kids for a workplace today where all of these things exist. And finally, we talked about this just a little bit already, but kids have access today to so much information. So when it comes down to it, It's really all about balance. We know there are some negatives, we know there are some positives, and our goal is really to help kids figure out how to achieve some balance so that they can take advantage of all these wonderful positives, be protected from the negatives, and use us as adults and as parents to guide them in that. So there are some common challenges that I hear about from parents. Sometimes when people don't feel comfortable with the types of technology that kids are using, they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure how I would provide guidance about this. Sometimes parents say, well, I don't know what limits to set. My child wants a cell phone, and I know as soon as they have a cell phone, they have access to the games and the texting and all of that, and I don't know what is appropriate to tell them about when they have to turn it off, where they plug it in. And then finally, challenges to setting limits exist across parenting situations, right? It's not as simple as saying, well, set a limit about it, and then you can do it, and kids follow it, and we're good to go. So these are just kind of the common problems that I hear about. A couple tips for addressing that first one, the lack of comfort with new media. I love Rendell's suggestion of having your child show you how to do something. Have them show you how to set up a Facebook account if they're over the age of 13 and know how to do that. If they're using your phone to play all sorts of games that you had no idea were there, ask them to show you how they're doing that. If they're searching YouTube for something, ask them to show you how to do that and how to know what to click on and what not to. There are also a couple websites that can be, I think, pretty useful, particularly for parents of kids who are doing online chatting or texting, and if you're doing some monitoring of that. I don't know about you, but I've seen some transcriptions sometimes, and I have no clue what they say. And I'm somewhat savvy, and I've just got no clue what these initials stand for. Netlingo and noslang.com both allow you to literally type in word for word at an online exchange, and they will translate it into just sort of, normal conversational English. It's amazing. Both of them also have searchable dictionaries, which is by turns fascinating or terrifying, depending on where you go in those. This disappeared here. I'll look up here. Those last two websites, netsmarts.org and parentfurther.com, both provide some really nice guidelines for parents around specific topics. Very specific. Everything from blogging to texting to internet research to YouTube. They're very accessible. They've got great videos. They've got great tip lists. I would recommend everyone check those out. So we all know that setting limits for kids is really important. Developmentally, very young children need limits set. Teenagers also need limits set, although ones that are adjusted for their particular developmental challenges. In setting limits around media use, you're doing a lot of really important things. You're promoting health, because there is some link between more screen time, more media use, and things like obesity and sleep disturbance. So you're promoting health. You're promoting positive behavior. We've known for years that really violent video games can have a really profound impact on kids' behavior. They promote more aggressive behavior. And the more interactive these games are becoming, the more danger there is for that type of behavior. You're promoting emotional well-being. There's some research out there to suggest that kids who spend a lot of time on media and digital applications are a little bit more at risk for some psychological disturbance, for some symptoms of depression, or just sort of a lessened sense of well-being. And you're also allowing your child to be in an environment where you're protecting against cyberbullying or access to kind of inappropriate adult content. So I'm not telling you these things because I think you don't know these things, but if you're finding yourself in a moment where you're wanting to talk with your child about a difficult media topic and you're sort of losing heart and feeling like, well, what's the point? These things are the point. These are really important conversations to have with kids. And as Rendell was talking about having these open and direct conversations with kids, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that that's one of the real keys to helping families feel like they're really approaching this digital age appropriately, and it's really, really crucial for kids. The AAP provides some guidelines. As we're talking about balance between media and all the other things going on in kids' lives, it can be helpful to turn to expert guidelines. Many of you may have seen these guidelines in the form of a handout from your pediatrician's office, or you may have gone over these verbally. In brief, kids less than 2 years are recommended to have no screen time at all. Kids over the age of 2 years are recommended to have 2 hours or less of screen time a day. As we know from that Kaiser Family Foundation research, 7 hours is a lot more than 2 hours. So the reality for most kids is that they're having more contact than this. AAP recommends keeping TVs and internet connections out of the bedroom, co-viewing with kids, and limiting nighttime screen media use. So those can be some sort of helpful general umbrella guidelines, but let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. What do we do given that we're in a world where the average 8 to 18-year-old has 7+ hours of media time? And as adults, this is exposure to media, to platforms that we haven't experienced, not in the way that they have. So we can do a really important thing by modeling healthy limits around technology. So if one of the things that we're asking of kids and teenagers is, hey, sit down with me and eat a meal and put the phone away, it's a good thing to model that for them. But that can also mean things like saying, when I get home, I'm not going to check email for a little bit because we're going to spend some time together. There are lots and lots of different ways to model appropriate and healthy use of things like email, texting, Facebook. Sit down with kiddos and send an email to a relative that they may not see very often. You can demonstrate the good and positive sides of these technologies in addition to just demonstrating this is how to kind of shut them off and put them away. Rendell talked a little bit about being a good citizen online. So parents of kids under 13 are in a tough position because a lot of times they want to be on Facebook. And they say, you don't understand. My life is going to be ruined if I'm not on Facebook. It's illegal. And you can show them, you can have them look with you on Facebook where it says it's illegal. And then you can talk about the other things that in our family we don't do because they're illegal. But that's the long and short of it. Having direct conversations with kids is really crucial. I think there are a lot of questions about how do I monitor without making them feel like I don't trust them? How do I keep an eye over their shoulder without making them feel like I'm really overbearing and overprotective? I think one of the best ways to prevent kids from feeling like they're not trusted or they're being overprotected is to talk about them, not to talk about them, to talk with them about the rules that you're putting in place, why you're doing the things that you're doing. So for example, if you decide that it's an appropriate time for your child to have a cell phone, I'd have a really good direct conversation with them about the fact that you can go online and you can see how many minutes they're spending texting. You can see how many phone calls they're making. You can see how many picture messages they're sending. I don't know that it's necessarily necessary or even appropriate for kids to have an expectation of confidentiality for the phone that you're providing for them. But that can convey some lack of trust unless you have an open conversation about it from the front. In terms of promoting balance, we want to provide alternatives for kids. So if they come home and they say, the only thing for me to do is get on Facebook and play video games, we want to have some conversations with them about other things that they can do. We want to help them explore their interests that don't involve social media. Maybe as a young kid, they were an avid reader, and you'd like to see them doing more reading. Can they read on a Kindle? Sure, absolutely. But is that somewhat different than surfing the internet and watching YouTube? Sure, absolutely. Promoting outdoor activities, promoting after-school clubs, promoting all the sorts of things that parents want to see kids doing to become well-rounded individuals, those are all also serving a purpose of being alternatives to being plugged in all the time. And then finally, we talked a little bit about monitoring. To say one word, there are some monitoring technologies out there, and I would encourage you, maybe before going the step of monitoring technology per se, to make sure that your kids are in a culture of knowing that mom and dad are checking in on how these things are being used. And we can talk a little bit more about that if people have specific questions. Quickly, 2 challenges to setting limits. Kids protest, right? They say, you're ruining my life. You don't understand. Everyone is doing this stuff all the time. Research comes to the rescue. And then I'll wrap up, I promise. So what the research suggests to us, that same Kaiser Family Foundation study divided kids into high media users and low media users. High media users were kids with more than 16 hours a day. Low media users were fewer than, I know, right? 16 hours. Some days I'm not even awake for that long. Low media users are fewer than 3 hours, and they asked them, do you have a lot of friends? And there was no difference. The high media users said, yeah, I have a lot of friends. The low media users said, yeah, I have a lot of friends. They asked them, how happy are you at school this year? The low media users said, yeah, we're really happy. The high media users, a little less so. So not only is it not detrimental to your child's social well-being for them to be using these media all the time, or for them to have limits around these media, but it actually can be helpful for kids to have some of those limits. Those kids who do have limits and who use the lower end of the hours of media in the day are perfectly happy, well-adjusted kids. So you're not ruining their lives. I'm just going to leave this slide up here for a second. If you notice any concerns for changes in mood, sleep, appetite, behavior, you have concerns about cyberbullying, don't feel like you have to do that alone. That's a good time to talk to your child's pediatrician. Some references. Thanks.